Hi, I'm George Fraser, CEO of Fivetran, and I'm joined today by Ali Ghodsi, CEO of Databricks, a close partner. Ali is also a neighbor here in the East Bay. Thank you for coming by today, Ali.
Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah, that was an awesome commute.
So, Databricks and Fivetran work together for hundreds of customers. Databricks is our fastest growing destination. For those not super familiar with the space, how do Databricks and Fivetran work together? Why do both these tools need to exist?
That's a great question. So Databricks, we do a lot of analytics, AI, data science, you name it. That means you do a lot of stuff with data. And so without data, the platform is useless. No access to data, no bueno. And now with generative AI and LLMs, even more important to get more data sets into the platform. So how do you get that data in? How do you get data in from Workday, from Salesforce, from SAP, from MySQL, you name it, all these different data sources? It's the number one thing everyone has to do first. If you haven't done that yet, there's really nothing you can do with the platform. So that's where Fivetran comes in. So Fivetran really makes that really easy to get all these data sources, get those into the Lakehouse, and then let people process it. And then especially with generative AI and large language model and so on, the game is now about quality. So we built an AI model, we evaluated it, the quality is not quite there. How do we improve the quality? Actually, the secret sauce often is, well, if there's more data, if there's more specialized data you have from different data sources that you haven't captured, they already exist in different systems inside of your corporation, but you haven't infused them into your AI models, then you can experiment and see, does that help improve the data quality? So then you can continue iteratively add more data sets using Fivetran into Databricks.
I agree with everything you said, and I would describe from the other perspective, what Fivetran does is we get all your data in one place, but Fivetran doesn't do anything with the data. We won't actually even show it to you in our UI.
That's why people love it, by the way, right? It just works.
We are specialists. We work very hard to make a very complicated thing seem very simple, but at the end, you get all your data in a lakehouse, but you need another system in order to do something with it. And one of the things we see with Databricks, which is the fastest growing destination on Fivetran right now, is what people love about it is the diversity of things that you can do with it. Unlike a lot of systems which are only give you a certain data model or a certain workflow, Databricks from the very beginning has had this great diversity of workloads that you can run on it. You can run notebooks, you can run SQL queries through JDBC connections, you can run Python code, you can run Scala code, you can run streaming, you can do a lot of different things in Databricks.
That's even R. You would like that,
really?
Right?
You can even do R?
You can do R. Didn't you do that back in the day?
I did used to write a little R back in the day. I was more of a MATLAB guy than an R guy,
right.
But I did write some R when I needed to do a GLM actually in 2000.
There you go.
And in 9.
That's the hottest thing you could do today, actually, in the market.
Yeah, running a GLM.
Yes. Yeah, actually, yes.
GLMs still work.
I know.
There's a lot of hot stuff about
Yes.
the latest and greatest language models.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, GLMs are still pretty great. Logistic regressions are still pretty great.
That's
I did
what
one
everybody's
recently,
doing.
actually.
What everybody's doing on the platform still today, right? If you want nail those numbers, you want to get them right, and you don't want the LLM that's just making up numbers for you, yeah, that's what works.
I'm really curious to hear more from you about this because, one of the cool things about Databricks is you can do so much with it. What do you see from the inside of Databricks? What's driving most of the workloads? What's the workhorses? What's the new stuff? What do people care the most about?
Yeah, about a third of the workloads are AI, on the whole platform. But yeah, the bulk of it is actually what now would be called traditional machine learning. Things like GLM, logistic regression, those kind of things. Everybody wants to do generative AI now. So every company we talk to, they want to do generative AI. There's multiple departments within the companies that are fighting. I own Gen AI in our company. No, I own that. And then there's, everybody's kind of rushing. The CEOs telling them, we have to get into production with the Gen AI model, right? It's not good. It's taking too long. Like, when are we going to get? So obviously that's what everybody's exploring. So the large language models and sort of our fine-tuning and building your own models using GPUs is the fastest growing service. It's like, we have like a dashboard in Databricks that's built in Databricks that looks at record consumption every day. And it's like the only service that has had record consumption every day through December, Christmas, every day. It's like, people train more and more models. So that's what's hot. That's what everybody wants to do. But then you ask them, like, okay, so how's it going with the Gen AI? Are you in production? Well, define what you mean by production. Well, I mean, are you getting value out of it? Yeah, actually, we want to talk to you about that. How do we know we're getting value? What is the quality? So I think everybody's exploring it. I think this year is going to be the year where, the rubber hits the road. Are you going to be in production? And does it have quality? And is it actually bringing the business value that you wanted? Were the investments worth it? So I think it's going to be a very important year for generative AI. But yeah, I think the workhorse of the AI workloads is classic machine learning, numerical, tabular data, and you want to get those predictions right and accurate. That's what people typically are doing. But that's, by the way, just a fraction of the platform. And then, of course, for all of this, it's back to the Fivetran. If I can get the dirty secret of all AI is that the hardest part of AI and machine learning and generative AI is the data. So are the data sources that you can extract more information from? That's the secret sauce. So that's where Fivetran comes in.
We have been having a lot of discussions at Fivetran of late. Do we need to do something different to support these new workloads? And my first reaction to it is, well, the data sources we're syncing now, they contain a lot of text data. They contain transcripts of calls. They contain descriptions of customers. They contain support interactions. They contain lots of stuff that you conceivably might use to fine-tune a language model. So my first take is, well, I think from a Fivetran perspective, this is just another workload. This problem looks more or less the same. We need to get the data from here to there. This is a new thing you're going to do with data. Do you think there's any additional nuance to that? Do you think that the rise of these new workloads is going to drive innovation in the data movement space? Is there a different need that is created by these new workloads?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, we don't know. I don't know what the future will look like. Obviously, we think about the same questions too. How is this big secular shift of generative AI is going to change everything, or is it? And how is it going to change it? I think for people that are writing very complex pipelines for ETL, so Fivetran is awesome. It just makes it work. You take away all the corner cases and all the problems. But there's also a lot of custom code people are writing for ETL pipelines in big data processing. The question is, do you need to write all that code anymore in the future? And can LLMs just write that code for you and kind of just be right? So that's one that we are exploring and seeing how much of that can we just automate away, and the large language models can just code it up for you.
I think that would be fantastic. You may be surprised to hear me say, we don't really think of ourselves as an ETL company. We think of ourselves as a data movement company. In fact, that was kind of the original key decision that unlocked the things people like about Fivetran is we said, well, we're not going to solve that problem. We're going to leave that for you. You need to write a complicated pipeline that transforms your data. That's going to happen after we deliver the data. We're going to treat data movement as a first-class problem, and that allows us to do a lot of automation, but it does leave behind this job that the user has to do in Databricks after the data arrives. And the more that job can be automated, I think the more productive everybody will be. One of the things I've long observed is that the appetite for data is infinite. It will expand to fill the budget and productivity available. If you make people 10 times more efficient and you make the tools 10 times cheaper, they will simply do 10 times more projects.
Exactly.
There's always more things on the backlog. There seems to be
100%.
no limit.
100%, yeah. But I think that's a great point that, so with Fivetran, you just move the data from A to B, and then transformation needs to happen. A lot of that is happening in Databricks today. The question is there a way in the future where a lot of that transformation can be just automated away with Gen AI?
Do you think that's the critical step right now, the sort of rate limiting step on people trying to get value out of data is the curation and transformation of the data, building those complex, highly customer-specific, workload-specific pipelines?
I think so. I think it's boring and it's not sexy, but it's the most important part. All the downstream cool stuff, whether it's Gen AI or chatbots or just reporting or PowerPoint or Tableau dashboards or whatever it is, they only work if this stuff before it, the data movement, the transformation parts are perfect, with no errors, no issues, never breaking, hit their SLAs, and that's hard to do. So if you could automate more of that, I do think it would be game-changing for the downstream use cases. So I think that's where the world is headed, and it's super important. And that's really where the secret sauce lies, I think, in most of the organizations that know how to do this stuff well.
We've talked about this idea of the lakehouse a couple times. We've used that term. Not everyone is familiar with it yet, although it's on its way. Lakehouse is something you and I have argued about over the years. I was a little bit of a Lakehouse skeptic a couple years ago. And what we've seen of late, all of the major platforms, Microsoft has OneLake, BigQuery has BigLake, Snowflake is going all in on Iceberg, and AWS has had Glue for a while. Everybody is converging on this idea of the Lakehouse, which really was pioneered by Databricks. So my question for you is, how does it feel to be right, Ali?
Look, the next thing that we're focused on is what we call data intelligence, and that's where our attention is and our energy is. It's great that the world is converging on Lakehouse. If there's one misconception about the Lakehouse that they're not getting right, is that a lot of folks are saying, hey, so if you store all your data in a data lake, and then it's just stored there, then you have a lakehouse, right? And then you do your workloads on top of it. You can run SQL on top of that data lake. Yeah, I have a lakehouse, right? Well, no. That's the data lake architecture from 2010. That is not a lakehouse. Yes, you store your data all in a lake, but you don't have a lakehouse. So to really get the lakehouse, you really need also governance. And the governance need to be not at the level of files. If governance is at the level of files, so we just have millions of files just lying there on a data lake, you're back to the data swamp. You're going to lose governance. You're going to have issues with security. There's going to be all kinds of challenges down the line. So that world actually doesn't work. It's the world that Cloudera, Hortonworks, the Hadoop vendors kind of invented 15 years ago. So that's, I would say that's like a missing ingredient. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, Lakehouse is it, and yeah, we agree with the Lakehouse approach that Databricks took. Well, double click on that governance, how that's done. You better have fine-grained security. You better have views of your data that are just consistent at the level of the business. You better have support for machine learning models, all these things, and you can govern them, secure them, cost control them. And that, I think, is lacking in many of the systems out there. They'll get there, but I think that's like a misconception right now.
Everyone's at a different stage, for sure.
You published a thing back in the day that said Databricks is a reliable or relational DBMS.
Yes, I did. It meant something important, and which I really do believe, which I think that the key idea of the Lakehouse, which you've just described in a different way, I think of it as bringing the best parts of a relational database management system to a data lake. And people think of RDBMSs as a big box in a data center that's very expensive, that has a DBA with a ponytail, watching over it all the time. But really, the key characteristic of a relational database is joins, and that governance that you just talked about, and in the form of a bunch of different key features of Delta Lake, Databricks accomplishes those, and I think that's a really cool evolution of the ecosystem. In some ways, it's the logical next step of the separation of compute and storage. We said, okay, we have separate compute and storage, but now we're going to have explicit separation. You're going to have two systems, and in principle, you can run different execution engines on top of the same storage engine. There's an interesting implication of that, which is a Databricks customer using Delta Lake, if they so choose, they can mix Databricks with other execution engines. Like you could run scikit-learn in Python on your laptop, and you could just bypass the Databricks compute layer and talk directly to the storage layer. That's a really interesting thing to do as a vendor, to let go of that level of control, to say, do what you want, even if you want to cut me out, go ahead. How do you think about that decision and that sort of intentional abdication of lock-in?
Well, I mean, it was on purpose, right? The whole idea was, how do you disrupt the market? How do you disrupt an existing market? So the idea was, let's level the playing field. We're just going to put the files here on the lake. The customer owns it. We don't own it at Databricks. You don't own it. You don't own it. Sort of let the best vendor win here, and people can mix and match. And it means that we're also not locking them in. And once you're using Databricks, we can't just say, okay, we're done here. We got this customer. They can't leave us. No, it's the data is on the lake. They could be, and any day they can see, wait a minute, I'm getting a little bit better results for the same workload. I can run a SQL warehouse using one of the competitors over here. Seems they've improved a lot in the last 6 months. Maybe I should use them instead. But also it gives us a chance then 6 months later to say, well, actually now we're better, so maybe flip over. So yeah, the lock-in is decreased, but you need the governance, and I think you nailed it. Like the fine-grained access control, being able to do that. So you don't want to have just a data swamp. You don't just want a lake and all the data is there and that's it. There has to be a much more higher level data warehouse-like governance model. So you might say, well, wait a minute. Are you just saying that? So maybe it's just a data warehouse. You just have separated compute and storage. I would say no. A lot of the engines out there today, they can't actually do ML or AI. You can say, yeah, we can bring in another engine. You could, but I think there's power in one unified engine that can both do relational joins and the kind of stuff that data warehouses do, and an engine that also natively can do AI. Like it can do the kind of advanced analytics, iterative, keep making the model, training the model, making it better and better and better. If you can do that, I think that's more powerful than, I think when you switch between the engines, that always creates friction.
There's a talk by Mark Rosvelt, who is he's a German computer scientist and one of the creators of DuckDB, in which he says, ML is not going to move into the database, even if we wish it very hard.
He's right.
And he points out that the ML ecosystem is simply so large.
Yep.
We cannot just go and create a bunch of UDFs and say, there we go, we've solved it. Now you can do ML in your database. No, this is a whole ecosystem of its own, and we have to build bridges between them in order to solve user problems. But they're gonna both continue to exist.
Yep.
We need to figure out how to make them work together. I'm curious, how do you find it to be different being a founder, the unique perspective of a founder? What do you think you do differently than someone who started tomorrow in your role would do?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the long-term perspective. I mean, things that we ponder, like, hey, what's Gen AI going to actually do to the field? What do we need to change? What does Fivetran fundamentally need to change because of Gen AI? What does Databricks need to fundamentally change because of Gen AI? Those kind of things. I think the professional CEOs, and of course, I'm like painting with a broad brush here, but generally speaking, they're more focused on, let's look at the financial metrics. What kind of growth do we need next year? And then what are the levers? How much do we invest here and there? And then how much do we get that growth? And that's okay to continue sustain the thing you have, and at the margins, make the financial statements look better. And I don't want to dismiss that. That's also, I have to do that. You have to do that too now, But I think that really going deep down into the product and thinking about, okay, how do we need to, what's going on with the product? Where is this product headed? I think that's something unique that you rarely find in professional CEOs. And you find it in all founding CEOs. Like all founders or people that were early on in the company that are running their companies, they're deep into it. And I think there's some professional CEOs out there, like Adobe and other companies, where they are actually deep into the tech. But that's, I think, the big thing. And the other thing is, I think probably founding CEOs typically don't mind taking big bets or big pivots if they actually believe in it. If they see a change coming or something that's needed, they will do that. Whereas I think if someone who comes in and they have like a 4-year gig, and then maybe they'll get another 4-year gig in the same company if they do well, they probably don't want to rock the boat too much,
Yeah, it's easier to make those kinds of big decisions when you've been there the whole time. You have a certain source of legitimacy.
Yeah.
And I think a willingness to take big risks. There are challenges of when you've been running a company since the beginning. There are some unique challenges to that too. I find you have to work at being able to recognize your own mistakes and correct them. It's harder when literally everything is your fault at some level. A trick I sometimes use is I will sit there and imagine if I was hired as the new CEO of Fivetran tomorrow, what would I do? What would be the thing where I would walk in and be like, I can't believe this idiot did this. We're changing this right away. Yeah. Do you have any tricks like that you try to use to see your own blind spots?
I think one of the principles that we try to, or I try to push the company, I try to push myself, is to do what you said, which is, we should do whatever a new company does. That new startup that's starting today and doesn't have any baggage and doesn't have all that revenue, what would they do? We need to do that. If we're deviating from what they are doing, that's the disruption that's in the making. That's the little small, startup that no one cares about. That soon will be a gigantic threat to your whole business. So
I love that principle. I often encourage people to ask this question: if we were starting over, how would we do it? And it isn't that you immediately go and do that.
Yeah.
Often the answer is you don't do that.
Yeah.
But you should always think about it.
Yes.
You should always look at it, and you should know if you're not doing that, why not?
Yeah.
I think it's a very important exercise and very powerful.
Yeah.
We've discovered a lot of things that way.
How have you changed as CEO? Over the
I've
years?
changed in every way. I mean, in the early days, I was the fastest programmer. That was my most important contribution, was just sheer volume of code. And then there have been many different versions of my job and myself since then. I often say that I just made a decision a long time ago that I'm just going to become whatever person I need to be to do the job as it exists now. And it really changes. Like every couple years, I would say it's a completely different job. And
if you're growing as fast as...
set of things to focus on. I mean, now a lot of the work I do, for example, is around getting the right metrics, which was not important when we were very small. What about yourself? What has really changed for you in like what you need to be good at as the company has grown?
Same. I mean, every 2 years, I think the job completely changes. New scale, new challenges. So you got to develop new skills, and it's just so. I do think it's like a new job every 2 years, essentially.
When you look at Fivetran over the next year, the most important things we're working on are data lake support, because there's still ways that we can make it better, cheaper for the customer, more performant, that are happening right now that will benefit us both. We're looking at these enterprise data sources that have been around for a long time. They might not be the ones everyone's talking about right now, but they are incredibly important. And enterprise scale is the other thing that's a really big priority right now, being able to handle the largest companies on each of those data sources in the world. And we have some of them now, and it's, the thing that works at a scale of 1 terabyte at 50 terabytes, suddenly it's a different game, and you have to do different strategies. And our vision at Fivetran is that no matter what, from the user's perspective, it just works. All of those challenges disappear behind that user interface. What are the key things that you're looking at for Databricks over the next, let's say, 12 months? What do you think are the most important vectors of innovation and adoption of recent innovation that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, let's start with the one, hey, you own the data. By the way, those vendors that you mentioned that are like, oh, wait, this is my data, don't take it. Or if you're taking it, let's micromanage exactly what you're doing with it. I think they're going to all come around. You can see it, and there's already pockets in those companies, big companies, that are like, hey, the data is leaving anyway. Who are we kidding? They need to join it with other data. They're not going to join it with other data with us. It needs to go to this. That's the paradigm is the data moves into a central location where it gets joined. And you join all the different data sources that Fivetran helps you move data to, right? So that's the paradigm. And that's not going to change with Gen AI or anything like that either. Even if we get superhuman intelligence and so on, you need to do fast join of all those data sets. You're not going to do that in place. You need to do that in a place where you can do joins fast. That's the relational database. So I agree with that. You said Delta Lake, which is the data format that lets our customers own their data. So that's great. And the Lakehouse, you said it, it's kind of, people have more or less adopted it. It's the future. There's a problem, which is, there's a small little detail, which is like, oh, well, there's actually 3 different formats. There's Delta Lake, open source project. There's Iceberg, open source project. There's Hudi, open source project, and there's probably others as well. And that kind of sucks. So like, perfect. We won. This is the right architecture. But there's this VHS Betamax thing going on.
I love that. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
I think that's perfect.
Once you pick Betamax, you can't use the VHS. It's like, what? Like, yeah, literally you can't insert it won't fit. Isn't it exactly the same thing? Yeah, it is. There's some small detail. Actually, this one is half an inch bigger. But well, does it need to be? Not really. But anyway, yeah, you can't. So maybe buy 3 video players for each of these. So that's really unfortunate. So one of the big things is this project uniform that we started, which is, can we just generate the metadata for all 3, and just, if you're storing the data in Delta, you just get all 3 out of the box. So we want to really push that to its extreme and make sure that you get full compatibility with Hudi, with Iceberg, so that it really works the same. It really doesn't matter. So if you store your data in Delta, it really is 100% the same, both on the read path and on the write path. There are other projects out there that are doing this too. There's a project called One Table and so on. So I think this is, I really hope, or maybe there's ways we can do that with Parquet in the future. But basically, if we can eliminate this problem of VHS Betamax so that there's one universal format, they all kind of look and smell the same. Why do we need to balkanize things? So that's going to be a big priority for us, to keep pushing that, eliminate that. We don't know, nobody benefits from that. Actually, you know who benefits is the people who don't want this Lakehouse architecture. Otherwise, the people that are in the Lakehouse architecture, we all just lose from this little VHS Betamax thing, because it balkanizes, and we can't. Not all the workloads work with each other. There are like 3 different, versions of the Lakehouse. So that's a big.
From your lips to God's ears, we are exactly on the same page. I think we also want this to happen. We're sitting from the other end, trying to figure out what can we do to help move the ecosystem towards this future where we eliminate the VHS Betamax problem.
Yep.
I think it'll be great for customers. It'll be great for the ecosystem. It will help that virtuous cycle of competition and innovation when there is no lock-in that we both want.
Yep.
And so let's hope.
Let's do it.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. That's a big priority for us. The other one for us is data intelligence, which I think is also important to Fivetran, which is how can we build AI models that are truthful and that do not hallucinate and give actually correct answers that enterprises want. There was an example. We were working with a customer, and they had built something before we got there. They had a chatbot. And when you asked it about recommendations, about, what's the best product in this category of that company, the chatbot had spit out recommendations of competitors' product. That's a better product. You don't want that. Okay, you don't want that in production. So how do you do quality monitoring in production? How do you make sure that the AI is tuned to do what you want it to do and actually trained on your data? So fine-tuned, and it's really truthful, and you have control over that, and you know what it's doing. That's what we call data intelligence. So the AI model has that intelligence of the data. It understands the data that it got from Fivetran and from that source. It needs to be completely coherent and consistent with that data that it got from Fivetran. So that's going to be a big, important focus area for us this year, doing that.
What you're talking about there is a legitimate research problem, because the way these language models work is somewhat mysterious.
Yep, it is. I'm a big believer in RAG, retrieval augmented generation. I think it's really the only way to solve this problem, at least in the near future. I don't really think there is any other better approach. Like just having a large language model that is just predicting next word and just producing next word, you kind of, who knows what it's going to spit out. You might not want it to say the thing that it's saying. However, in RAG, you have a database, and you insert the data that you got from Fivetran, and it is in there. Now, these are the actual facts that we want you to know. And by the way, you can update it. So you can keep running Fivetran regularly and update so that that vector database is always up to date. So no more, hey, sorry, I have a cutoff from 2021. I don't know the answer to that. You can update it in real time. You can put access control on it. And then in the RAG system, you use the large language models to answer questions. You take the question, but then you instruct the large language model. You retrieve from the database the most relevant facts. You say, hey, I'm giving you these facts. Please adhere to these and respond using this information that I gave you from this database right now. And that has a bunch of benefits. You can update the database, so you can get this data from Fivetran more regularly, and you can keep updating it, so it's always up to date. 2, you can put access control on the database, so you can say, well, I don't want George to have access to this very sensitive salary information here. And then 3rd, I think you can reduce hallucinations. So because you're going to that, and you can also verify.
Because you're prompting it with something that based on the search, is relevant to the question that was asked.
Exactly. And you also know the source. So the model can actually tell you, by the way, the reason I'm saying this is because of this fact that came out of it. And you can go verify, I see. Or actually, no, it didn't actually, it misread that fact. It's actually not doing so. At least there's a way to verify, rather than it just saying, hey, the best product is that product. And it's like, that product doesn't even exist. So think of this as a whole system, RAG. You can now actually optimize the models, the LLMs, to be very truthful to what's in that database. So you actually can train models that maybe are not good at many things, but they're very good at really paying close attention to what you give them from so you can start specialize this whole system to be more and more truthful and give you really pay attention to data quality. So that's what we call data intelligence. And I think that's going to be important for both of our companies. And I think for a lot of customers out there, this is super important.
I think retrieval augmented generation makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
At one level, it looks like a little bit of a hack.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm just going to do a search, and then I'm going to feed the relevant text into the context window of the language model and then ask it about it. But sometimes hacks are amazing.
Yeah.
And it has this benefit that you can bring a lot of the traditional ideas from relational databases about things like access control into a language model pipeline in a straightforward way. Sometimes people ask, hey, should Fivetran be supporting vector databases as targets in order to support these retrieval augmented generation pipelines? And my answer so far is I don't think so. I think that is best done as a post-processing pipeline, because it's not like you're just going to put all of your data into a retrieval augmented generation into a vector database.
Yep.
You're going to want to put highly select data in there. You're going to want to pre-process it. You're going to change your mind sometimes about what approach you want to do to embedding, and so you're going to need to replay. That looks to me a lot like the transformation and curation steps that we've always said are best thought of as a separate problem that's done as a second step. You've thought about this a lot too, though. Am I wrong? Is the new popular destination for Fivetran next year going to be a vector database?
I'm sure you'll have to add it, and there'll be requests for it. But I think you're right. I think that processing needs to happen. And it turns out exactly how it's called chunk that data before you put it in there, and exactly how you do the ranking, and exactly how you tune the embeddings. Those things matter a lot to the quality that you're going to get. So I do think for each application you want to get those really right. So yeah, there's I think some processing that happens in between, but that's one of our focus areas, getting that right. But I think that's something that it's not, the market hasn't, we figured this out, and it's like everybody does it the same way, and this is old news from the 70s. It's not. This is active research, but that's the second focus area for us, that we're really focused on this data intelligence.
So you and I have both been working in this space for over 10 years, and there's been a lot of change in that 10 years. At the beginning, the hot thing was Hadoop.
Yep.
And one of the most fun and most exciting things, and sometimes most scary things about this space, is that it's not over.
Yep.
There's a new wave of innovation around the corner, it seems, every couple of years. And to me, that's just part of the fun. Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, looking forward to seeing what happens next, with AI, Gen AI, all the things, the new data sources, the renewed excitement around data and AI in the world by everyone now. It'll be interesting to see.
Couldn't agree more.